Hey, it's Vu, and I wanted to go over a few things that I learned on my road to global here in 2021. And of course, some of these are things that I already generally knew, and some of them are somewhat new information to me. Before we go any further, I'd like to thank our sponsor, xplay.gg. xplay runs a set of CSGO servers, one of which is bots. Bots is essentially a deathmatch with 3 levels of difficulty. Medium level is good for newer players or more relaxed time with bots that have a 650 millisecond aim speed. Hard level bots have a 450 millisecond aim time, and for players looking for an extreme challenge, cheater bots have a 350 millisecond aim speed, which is incredibly challenging. These servers are actually very interesting as the bots don't play anything like bots you would typically expect. They won't shoot you in the back, you've got advanced stats if you hold down E, and there are even challenges on their website where you can earn free skins. The first thing to talk about is that the system doesn't want you to play too many games. Yeah, the system itself is a Glicko-based system, not Elo, and with Glicko, at least in relation to CS, when you play a little bit less, it will increase the uncertainty of your rank, which means any game you play will be worth somewhat more than if you were playing a whole bunch of games in a row. So spamming out 12 hours worth of games, well, the final game you played is probably worth notably less in terms of ranking up than the first game you played. That means you probably should, unless you're trying to go from Gold Nova to Global in a month like I was, not play 6 hours a day hoping for a rank up. It's simply not an effective use of your time. And not only is it not great for the system, it's also just not good for you personally. Generally, when it comes down to it, playing something like 8 hours in a row is going to have significantly diminishing returns into how quickly you are improving. It's much better both for the system to rank up and for yourself to improve to play shorter stints of Counter-Strike more often rather than playing 12 hours in a row once a week. Now, the first and most obvious thing I realized when it came to this road to global is that inconsistency is going to happen no matter how good you are. And I like to think of myself as okay at Counter-Strike, but one of my first losses occurred right around the MG level. And these should have been fairly easy games, but the reality is that Counter-Strike is a percentage-based game. You can make a play that's a good play, but is only an 80% chance to work out. And eventually, if you play enough games, you're going to get into a game where you make some good plays, but they simply don't work out in your favor several times in a row. The main thing you can make sure you're doing is not getting too tilted about it when things start out poorly for you. If you start out James Bonding it up at 007 and then you get tilted and you stop making good plays, well, the odds of the game continuing poorly go up by quite a bit, as opposed to if you keep a level head, you go 007 and you continue making the correct play over and over. And I especially notice this in teams when you go down by a reasonable scoreline. Pugs are some of the most swingy, momentum-based ways you can even imagine Counter-Strike. And the reality is, I've had games where I've been 13-2 down going into T-side of Train or Nuke and come back and won without even dropping a round. Games swing incredibly easily when you're playing with random teammates against random opponents. As long as you can keep a level head, you can make ridiculous comebacks that you may not ever have expected. The next thing, and I'm sorry to burst some bubbles here, but in my experience, there's not actually nearly as many cheaters as people like to make out. Valve said that the majority of players experience a cheater something like 1 in every 10 or 20 games, and in my experience in European matchmaking at least, there were not that many cheaters. There were certainly some players that were suspect, and that's one of the things that playing on Faceit or any other client is going to give you peace of mind for, that you don't have to question if someone is cheating. However, there was only a couple of players in my nearly 160 games over the course of a month that were actually outright clearly cheating. Now, there are, of course, some regions that might be a little bit different, as well as if your trust factor isn't very high, this is going to make a serious problem in terms of how many cheaters you're experiencing. But in my experience, I think people are a little bit too quick to call cheats on their opponents when they're simply having a good day. Now, the next thing that I experienced that I really didn't expect to experience during this road to global was a serious downswing. As a Face-It 10 player in matchmaking, somewhere around Supreme should probably be right about Face-It 5. However, even playing at this level, in Supreme I played some of the worst CS I've ever played in my life, and yes, that is taking into account I started playing CS when I was like 10 years old. I was playing absolutely abysmal CS, and sometimes the reality is just taking a break is actually the solution. Unfortunately, if you're trying to get global elite for bragging rights and you only have a month to do it, taking a break is a little bit hard to come by, and that can lead to some serious downswings. I had maybe a 10 or 20 game period where I was playing absolutely horrific CS. Counterintuitively, in trying to get out of this downswing, I was grinding more deathmatch, I was playing more CS, and it was actually just that I needed to take a couple of days off and return with a clear mind. Sometimes the solution is actually to take a bit of a break, come back, and attack the problem again with a clear mind, and it'll make it a lot easier. But one of the other things you can do is you can make sure those downswings don't happen too often by being adaptable. Adaptability really is the key when it comes to ranking up consistently in a pug environment where you're playing with random teammates. You don't want to be that guy that you can only lurk or you can only run in first. You want to be able to play based on the way your teammates are playing, based on the way your opponents are playing, and change things around. Now, of course, being adaptable in your playstyle is imperative, but adaptability can also come down to communication. Just to let your teammates know what you're doing and what your ideas are, and try and get everyone on the same page. Of course, this isn't always possible, especially in scenarios where you don't speak all the same language, so sometimes the best way to communicate is through action and trying to lead your team into a bomb site if they're all stacked up and nobody's pushing in can be a good idea as well. Or you just say go, go, go. Now, one of the realities of Counter-Strike that people don't typically accept is that you're not going to be able to win every game. Some games simply aren't winnable. Even if you're playing out of your mind, occasionally you're going to lose games that you're carrying. And what you want to make sure you're doing is in those sorts of games, you're not getting too frustrated and you're using them as learning experiences. I've pointed out to the 60-20-20 rule in the past, where 60% of your games, and of course it might even be a little bit less depending on how lucky you are, but 60% of your games in theory you have an impact on, and you can change whether you win or lose if you play well enough. 20% of the time you're pretty much automatically going to lose no matter how well you play, and 20% of the time you're pretty much automatically going to win no matter how well you play. And so when you keep this in mind, you realize that you only want to do your best to impact those games that you can have an impact on, and not let the games that you can't have an impact on make you too frustrated or get in the way of you learning. Even if you're losing something like 14-2 in the middle of a game, if you get a gun round out, you can still use that as a learning experience to try something out and see how it works. You don't have to write off a game as soon as you're down 10-3 because you think, oh, well, it's an automatic loss. And this does loop back into the idea that, well, if you are down 13-3 or something like that and you're trying things out and you have a positive mindset, well, your team is much more likely to have a positive mindset as well and potentially come back from this scoreline. Of course, that's not always the case, but sometimes it does work like that. Now, one of the things I've found has varying levels of success because sometimes your teammates don't respond very well to this, but be willing to suggest solutions to problems. I've found very often, especially on a map like Inferno, my team will lose B and just get double entry'd 7 times in a row, and we're down 10-0 because of the ecos as well. And someone on my team will say, wow, awful B players, learn to play the game. Now, the goal is to chop off that part where your teammate is toxic and get in a little bit ahead of time, both for your own sanity so you can actually win the game, and also because you can be a more reasonable human being than your teammate can be when the game already seems lost. The important thing here is be nice about it. But if something is consistently going wrong, suggesting a solution or asking a question can be a way to make things go easier. And again, with this B site on Inferno example, because trust me, this is one of the most common problems, simply asking what happened there or offering to support or offering to trade positions can be an effective way to make your teammates feel better, and oftentimes I find the answer is, yes please, I don't ever play B. Of course, this can occasionally backfire. However, I think it backfires much more often if you continue to lose rounds, don't suggest a solution, and then one of your teammates rage quits. Now, one of the things that does hurt me inside a lot as someone trying to rank up quickly is when your teammates make plays that you think, or potentially even know, if you're a superhuman, are bad plays. Now, you kind of have to make this decision in the game yourself, but my recommendation is that if your team is doing something together, it's usually a good idea to do it with them. Now, you can suggest something else, like guys, running knife out down middle probably isn't going to win us the round here, but if they're certain they want to do it, I would generally recommend going along with it. Of course, partially because it might work in that round specifically, but also because it will make them a little bit less annoyed when they don't have to ask green, why are you sitting in apartments when we rush down middle? On the flip side, my recommendation for people that really want to win is to not IGL too hard. I find this is very common when people are really dedicated trying to get a rank up, that they focus on trying to tell their teammates how to play, not just backseat gaming, which is always a bad idea because different players might play the game in two completely different but both equally correct ways. Generally, when you look at a matchmaking or a pug game, you're going to see that players typically aren't used to being told exactly how to play. They're much more comfortable just doing the few things that they're used to doing themselves. So if you try and micromanage them and you try and actually in-game lead a pug, you might find that things go even worse than if you were just playing uncoordinated Counter-Strike in the first place. Now, this isn't to say that trying to organize your teammates a bit is a bad idea, especially in the mid-round, telling them to group up with you, or if you have a read or something like that, just trying to get people together on the same page is a great idea, but I do often see people that are dedicated to ranking up will try and micromanage their teammates and from spawn call complicated strats when really that's kind of hurting you more than it's helping. Now, the final thing, and probably the best advice if you want to rank up quickly or even just to improve in general, is to find a friend and play with them a little bit more often. Not only will this make far more games carryable from your own perspective, as two players can have much better impact on the game than just one, as well as the level of coordination you can have with a teammate allowing you to do even more plays that might have impact themselves, it's also just going to make you enjoy the game a little bit more. In general, what I've found is that being friendly to people in your games, being nice, and then inviting people that are also chill players to play with you is going to be a recipe for success in the short term and in the long term. In the short term, it'll give you a much better chance of winning with a friendly teammate, and in the long term, it'll actually help you enjoy Counter-Strike instead of getting burnt out and hating the game. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope this helped.